Right, we are live.
Finally. Hello, hello.
Finally, you're right. Oh, absolute nightmare that. Tech issues, computer crashes right before I need it to crash. Everything's going all fine. Right. Hello. Anyway, hello chat. I don't know who's actually here. I don't know who's watching. Yes, hello George. We have life. Apologies ahead of time. That went poorly. Let's put it like that. Right.
We're trying.
I know. Like, I had everything set up and everything was good. Yeah, I think I've fixed it now. I hope I fixed it anyway. The yeah, I had everything ready to go and my computer crashed literally as I was clicking go live, and that's why the previous link didn't work and other things were going mad. Yes. Hopefully everyone's all right from across where they are. We've got West Coast, we've got Three Sails, we've got the usuals. We've got Hold On, Hobbit Hold On even, who I don't recognise. So unless I'm just crazy and stupid, which are both probable, I'd love to know where you guys are from, or who you. But anyway, right, yes, Carlo, it's the second tourney chat. What's going on with you?
Sorry, also having a few little sound problems at my end. I think we'll get there. I'm sure we can cut this bit out, right?
Yeah,
it's not like we're live. Yeah, it's pretty good. Busy as always. When is that ever not the response? It was my birthday 2 days ago, so I treated myself and took a whole half day off from working on the website, and back at it.
Have you considered that half day off that you just had was inappropriate?
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
It was almost on my mind most of the day.
It was. It certainly isn't good for me to know that you had a day off. Plus, it means that Commander Spotlight stuff has been delayed, obviously, which is no good whatsoever.
Yeah, that is the day when I'm supposed to put together a Commander Spotlight video, so that one might have to skip for this week. It'll be back next week.
If things had played out differently and I had more time over the weekend, I would have edited a video of all your outtakes, and I would be playing that right about now.
Yeah.
But I didn't because
Plenty
I was
of them.
busy.
I could fill the next couple of hours, so let's
Anyway.
Let's not dwell on them.
Let's not.
Let's get down to why we're here.
Well, obviously, the main reason why we are here this week is to talk about some more tournaments. It's to talk about specifically one or two tournaments that we have in mind this week. So let's get the ball rolling a little bit.
Where are we starting, Mickey?
There
Which
we go.
one?
We're starting.
You wanna...
Well, let's start with where we plan to go on from. Whoops, that's not. Don't want to enter a game. Let's go to Boards and Swords, I reckon, because that's the first one.
Boards and Swords.
Which is now finished. I'll get the players up for everybody to see. And what do
Mickey
we see?
Could have been a champion.
Yeah, I think the terminology is I messed it up.
Yeah.
Is the correct terminology. So yeah, there's Boards and Swords for us. Final rankings. We see Mazara, which is probably an account name or a name that probably doesn't ring any bells to anybody, but is one of Furioku's accounts. He has a couple on the site for different tournaments, I think. And he
doesn't do him any favors.
No, of course it didn't. Big feels bad, yeah. Deoxys
spreads his ranking across multiple accounts, making it harder to get a good ranking.
Yeah. He took Starks in this tournament, and through his own words, he didn't think Free Folk can win tournaments, and Starks is easy mode. And then he went and won the tournament with Starks easy mode. I mean, it wasn't actually in his favour, as we know. I was in a position with a crushing win. I could have taken first place, and he would have done nothing he could have done could have prevented that. But if those of you watch the stream and those of you watch me play, I played like a dead cabbage in the first couple of rounds in that game yesterday against Crag. He played well, and I lost. So that sucks. But
I mean, so the first thing I would say about Boards and Swords is so it's slightly odd. It's a 24-player tournament, which is a weird number. We effectively end up with what is kind of termed a incomplete 32.
mhm.
That means is that we're sort of like in a 32-player bracket, but we don't have all 32 players.
No.
A 32-player bracket, i.e., anything more than 16 players, needs 5 rounds to have a single undefeated player. They kind of advertised the tournament as if it could be 5 rounds if 5 rounds were needed, but then it's ended up being 4 rounds, which is fine. But we've ended up with 2 undefeated players, so we do actually have a very close finish between a Baratheon and a Stark here. So to just say Stark's won is kind of one thing, but technically the secondary divider goes to Furioku. But Baratheons also went unbeaten, which is interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is. And I think it's more. I think it's. I don't know. It's more than just Baratheons went unbeaten. I think. Those of you that saw the game, Crag played that Baratheon list well, played that scenario well. But the Roose list he took, I mean, there were a fair number of Stark entries, but not a huge percentage more than any other faction in this particular tournament. Free Folk and Starks were relatively largely entered.
If
I
we
mean,
dig over the
still,
stats,
yeah, still significant actually.
33%. It's about what we see. Third of all people play Starks, roughly,
And
which in a 7-faction game is pretty big.
yeah, and it was more than just that. I mean, we saw Crag, the list he played in all but one of his games. And take me on this. I did all the prep. I looked at this and I analysed it. He took Roose in all of his games leading up to that, and he played Renly in the final. And I will actually get onto a question that George asked our group regarding Renly. We'll get onto that in a second. But Crag played Roose against Skunk. He played where is he? He played Roose against against Danbuck, another Stark player. In round 3, played Roose against Rob, and then in round 4 we can see he played Renly against me. He played his Roose list, which is a counter Stark list, against Starks, and he beat them, strangely enough. That list, very well crafted, very well structured for beating those kind of opponents. And I think this is good. I think this is good because it shows something that was discussed on Discord for a lot, was can Baratheons create a counter to Starks? Because at the moment, they just seem to lose to them. And there is an option. There is an option they can take that does counter it, and the statistics are starting to prove that that list can beat them. Is it a nice list? I mean, if we go into a little bit more on Crag's lists, we can see his Roose list is basically Warden spam, players, priestesses, and some Rule of Faithful thrown in. He had extra points, I think. But it's Roose, Axel, Melisandre combo. And his idea, having spoken to him, is just burn people. If they can't do anything about it, just burn them. And kill them. From distance, you don't have to engage, and you've just got enough units and enough staying power to do the job for the rest of the game. Now,
I think
as
that
I like
it's a list which a lot of people won't enjoy to play into because it's it feels oppressive and it feels unfair more than it actually is powerful. It feels powerful because people always underplay the amount of damage you're doing to yourself with Melisandre. But that psychological side of the game is genuinely very, very powerful. If you feel like you have to attack, you have to move forward, otherwise you're just going to lose the game, you're going to get wiped out. It puts a huge amount of pressure on you, and it can force you into making a lot of mistakes. So yeah, I do think that it's quite an extreme list, quite a harsh list. The Roose Panic, Melisandre, Axel, Florent combo into Starks. But I would say that the Stark players bring it upon themselves. If you're going to spam direwolves, particularly, most importantly, if you're going to play direwolves in both your lists, if you're not going to play either of your lists to be more of a balanced mindset and be like, oh, they might bring out Axel Florent, who's just going to kill off wolves instantly. If you're not going to adapt to the fact that this exists in the game, you leave yourself open to getting absolutely blown up.
Yeah, definitely.
By this list combo.
Definitely. And that's, I think this is a big takeaway from this, is that, we see Baratheons coming up. The Baratheons are coming up the rankings slowly, and I think it is from somewhat people making these meta lists and working out what works in the meta. But, and I will say this, I think it's a big but, these lists are quite single-minded. The Renly list that Crag beat me with, I think, by all accounts, Crag played really well, and I'll never take it away from what he did in that game. He played the matchup well. But if you watch the game, I threw it. I threw that game away with some very poor choices on turn 2 specifically. I forgot rule 1.
I think what Baratheons do in general is that, particularly Rose Knights, but actually Baratheons just entirely in general, is that they are very good at capitalizing on a mistake that your opponent makes.
And holding a winning position.
You in a position that they shouldn't really have attacked, then you can countercharge, you can Houses of the Fury, you can Last Stand, you can put all sorts of pain onto your opponent if they make an action which they didn't really need to do. So there are a lot of ways that you can walk into Baratheons and just give them a win. But where it gets to a step more complicated or a step higher is that once your opponent understands that, once they know that Baratheons are powerful, they know that they're good, it becomes much more baity in that you make the skill becomes making your opponent think that they're going to have a good attack against you. You have to bait them and be very, very aggressive with your positioning, possibly even give up flanks and allow your opponent to make charges which look like they're bad for you, as long as you have the right cards in hand to counter them.
Yep.
And that can take them to a whole nother level, and that can make them better. What you're doing then, however, still, I would say, is you're still forcing your opponent to make mistakes. It requires your opponent to choose to make a mistake, choose to engage in a combat that they actually can't win when they think that they can. And there are cards in the Baratheon deck which have huge effect in that way. But if your opponent just denies it continuously, I think it still can be difficult. So it's a toss-up. I still think that so many of the games are determined by one or two mistakes, even at the very top level. And Baratheons are very, very good at capitalizing on those mistakes, but you still require your opponent to make them. I still think that a Stark Direwolf list is, if played with no mistakes, won't lose to almost any opponent. It's the big, big thing of you must play with no mistakes, and that's incredibly hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the game I play, the big mistake, I followed 2 rules going into the game. Don't attack unless I really need to. Tie them up with raiders, do things like that. And just control the points and walk away with them. And my rule was simple. I need to take horses if I can on the first round. He got first round, so he took it, obviously. But my next big thing was prioritize taking crowns with Val to replace it with a maneuver, to do a free shimmy somewhere, to block another charge, to put something in the way. More importantly, stop an easy crown bomb on a unit to drop a token. Because if I don't have to drop a token, I cannot... He then has to prioritize crowns on his first turn when he goes first, which is not a particularly great thing for him to do, to force me to drop a token, and it puts the onus on me, then priority to get it back and put the position in my favour. I messed that up, and so 3rd or 4th activation on that turn, he took crowns and was like, oh, it's a free drop. And I'd already spent resources, I'd already messed up, basically. And I could have recovered, but I chose not to. I messed up. But I know that that's the mistake I made, which doesn't make me feel any better about it, but I might add. I felt absolutely awful after that on Saturday, because I realised I'd thrown it rather than necessarily he'd won it. But then he did the right thing after that, and he controlled the game well enough. But he made his own mistakes. And that's a key.
Brathians
You know,
are the hardest army in the entire game to get the objectives back off them once you allow them to have them.
yep.
So the entire game plan into that Renly side, particularly Renly Charismatic Heir, has to be denial of ever giving them the tokens in the first place. Be that tokens that you pick up and drop on a panic check, or tokens where you need full coverage, which is about getting far enough over the token so that you can on any given round retreat and still control it, and then you just steadily give ground. The idea is always going to be against these very slow, very powerful Brathian lists, is that you choose to continuously give ground while maintaining control of the objectives. You are not going to win a fight-based game against them, and that's pretty constant for almost all people who play into them.
I think there was one other thing that I really wanted to mention from a competitive standpoint, though. I have been very active on the Discord talking about this, and I know that there's a lot of different schools of thought. Stannis, 1000 Thor Commander, popular Baratheon player, and he'll talk a lot about Baratheons being a powerhouse and having the ability to do what he wants with them. But I am yet to see a Baratheon player, and Crag is no different, really. I have yet to see a Baratheon player force a decision upon their opponent where their opponent already hasn't made a mistake. Like,
interesting.
They can force decisions once their opponent makes mistakes, and they're very good at doing that. Very good. But actually, like, I've never seen a Baratheon player who's playing against somebody playing well, being able to make them forced to make a bad choice. Either option here is not good for you. Do what you can. And that's because of the nature of the way the game is played.
The fact that they are a very reactive force. You could say similar about the Lannisters, but they are not as reactive as the Baratheons. But as an entirely reactive force, you are waiting for your opponent to do something which you can capitalize upon. And like I say, it mostly seems to be a case of maybe baiting the thing that you want to happen into getting played. I would just to talk about, like I was saying, the thing I really love to see Crag take on Furioka Masara, because it'd be interesting to know which way that went. He does have a very anti-Stark list, anti-Direwolf list. Big question about, obviously hugely depends on what game mode gets picked or gets drawn or whatever, because
it would be Fire and Blood. It would actually be Fire and Blood if the randomizer was, I believe, the only one left to pick.
Which would be interesting. That does play well into the Baratheons. I think that they should play that game. I don't think it should change the tournament or anything like that, but I think that they should take those two lists and between themselves organize that game and play it, because I want to know which way it goes. And I think that it's just unfortunate when you run an incomplete bracket that you don't end up with the single winner.
So this is an alternative little thing that came up as well, and I was considering this a lot yesterday. The panic mechanism for changing tokens. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is this something that is inherently problematic? And I say that from a standpoint where we look at poor fellow. No. Actually, from a free folk standpoint, I do not mind that I lose the token easily. I think that's a balance-wise, I'm completely fine with that. The question isn't whether or not I lose it easily, whether other units in the game, and I'm thinking Poor Fellows as an example of this, they just don't lose them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those weird scenarios where you can build very good lists, build in a way to take on opponents and to have attacks and things like that going on, and to have the ability to kill units. But then things like Poor Fellows, Rose Knights are of a similar ilk. Although their base morale being quite high, actually, is not actually that great base morale. They just have the tools to make it better. When they get hold of these tokens, they become impossible almost to take it off them. You have to kill the unit. And actually, it's very hard to kill these units by their very nature. So I don't know, what do you think?
Um, so I think that that's a mindset which is more that defensive units shouldn't exist. That's effectively what you're saying. You know,
No, no,
like
no. I don't.
morale is
Yeah,
just a part of what defense is.
agreed.
You know, units in general that are defensive with good saves also have good morale as a general across the board. You're talking about, you know, everything from Thens in Free Folk have the best morale of the Free Folk. Tully, Sworn Shields, Rose Knights, they all have better than average morale and probably ways to make it better. I think, yeah, are you having sound
It's
problems?
fine.
But
It's fine. It's fine.
yeah, and so you're effectively saying like that. What you have an issue with is that units getting onto an objective have to be able to be killable. But really, it's an issue of that they already generally balance that against the fact that these are all the slowest units, so they are the hardest ones to get the token with.
Completely agree.
I don't think that there's any, for me, there's no difference between the ones that drop tokens on morale and the ones that hold them and are contested.
I
It's
think there is a
a
subtlety.
very similar mechanic to me.
I
It's
think there is a
subtly different.
major subtlety, being that as the aggressor, like once a defensive army is able to control the tokens, which actually, you know, at movement 5 for Poor Fellows as an example, that's not actually unrealistic because most units in movement 5. Yes, you've got fast units at 6 and cavalry, which are a different matter entirely. But once a defensive army has the token, and this is true of other game modes as well, which we'll come on to some of the beta game modes. If your defensive army gets the token, the problem you run into is that it's very hard to take it off them. Whereas at least in things like Game of Thrones, for example, you don't have to take the token off them, but at least you can stop them scoring points. They might still have it, but at least they're not scoring. And that subtlety, like there is no, once a unit has a token, basically, it has it. And either I'm scoring or you come and take it off me and you're scoring. Whereas in games like Game of Thrones, and I think this is a big point I was going to make about Harakars, because Harakars have been obviously a massive conversation thing going on a lot. Harakars have got 5 wounds, meaning that if they charge an infantry unit, they don't even have to do a single wound, and in Game of Thrones, they immediately contest and you will not score victory points on that point.
Interesting.
But actually, against all of the armies...
The same can be said for Mountain That Rides already.
Yes, exactly the same could be true of Mountain That Rides. And that's brilliant. I think that's a great mechanic, a unit that can contest without necessarily having to do damage. Because it's a tool that you can use to exert pressure. But against defensive armies with the high morale, either they fail a token on like a 1 in 36 chance, or you know there might be some things with flanks and things to make that worse, or they simply don't, and you either have to kill them, which again you've got to assume your opponent's trying to prevent you killing them. And I think for me it's a very binary system, whereas I'm scoring or you're scoring, versus we can contest this and it's a battle that's happening. And I disagree with the I control, you control system, because it actually, again, it plays in Free Folk's favour, because I just attack you as late as I can in the hope that you fail a morale test, and if you do, then I control the token I'm scoring. That in itself, again, favours the high activations, it favours these other things, and I'm not suggesting it needs changing. I just think that those game modes are very binary, whereas the other ones aren't. And I just think it's. I don't think it's a balance issue.
I have no issue with the hold and control. I have no issue, although I say it as a person who plays good morale armies in general. I have no issue with the concept of high morale armies having to be killed to lose this token. I actually have more issue with the ability of an experienced player to be able to fully cover an objective and know that you can't contest me because you will charge me, attack me, do whatever you do, and I'll just retreat remove myself from combat and still cover it.
Yeah.
And so it's no different. And the
Agreed.
difference there is that you have to physically wipe me out to stop me from doing that, because you can't even make me fail the panic check to pass it over.
Yeah.
So I think they both have their things. They both have their pros,
Weaknesses.
their cons, the units that are strong for them, units that are bad for them. I think it's really important that both exist. I think it's really important that both exist in the game at the same time, because if it was just that you drop tokens based on a morale test, then I think that high morale armies would just become absolutely the go-to thing for any kind of control.
Well, I think it's
if it was
worth
just
pointing out.
positional play, then I think that basically spamming for contesting would become absolutely the number one thing. Free Folk, I think, would just be dominant based in the fact that they can provide so many insignificant units while also having so many units that can contest. All they have to do is knock off one rank and they will have somebody on full ranks to be able to contest it. So I think that it's important that they both exist. It makes it much more difficult to write army lists because you're writing for two different styles at the same time. I think Poorfellows are a very unique case. They're a very, very unique unit. They have good morale, but the most terrible stats in the game.
Yeah.
And
yes.
Greg saying that we
yes,
agree
Greg.
that Free Folk is a problem.
Well, I actually do think that Free Folk are a problem, but that's another conversation for another day.
They are, but problems one way of putting it. I would say another thing is that they make it difficult because they sit outside of the way most other factions function. You must always consider them when balancing the game rather than just balancing the game in a general sense. And it makes things difficult. A little bit like when I was talking about neutrals, you've got to consider the effect that they have on everything. You can't make them too powerful, otherwise they're in everybody. But you make them too weak, nobody uses them. And it's such a fine balance because they're so intrinsically different to the rest of the factions.
I mean,
hey, that's just a varied game. We don't want it to just be
pick a house and there's all the same things,
and you just play mirrors continuously. It's not chess. It's not chess. Like,
I think the big thing for me with the morale, which is why I questioned it, is and to some extent the Game of Thrones problem is true, but a good player has to play that way and set up those maneuvers to do that. So it won't just happen naturally, but it's fully possible for even as a Free Folk player. I hasten to add, I could just run in, claim all the tokens, and then happen to never fail a panic test with those units. And the agency becomes outside of the player, and player skills cease. And I know that the statistics are unlikely for that to happen. I'm fully aware of that. But when you play for odds, and you lose the odds, and now I know it's a dice game. When the agency is outside of your control and it's purely down to dice rolling, that is a very negative play style and a very negative play experience for people, which already exists in the like of the secret mission decks. And people complain about secret missions all day, every day, and they hate them and they say they're terrible. But then when you say, actually, whether or not you drop a token is completely random as well, they suddenly go, oh yeah, but that's fine and balanced. And
True.
I disagree, and this is where I disagree that the problems, and Mela's a good example as well. But
yeah, but I mean,
we could go on.
Argument, the panic tokens exist, vicious exists.
Exactly.
Like there are ways to make more tests happen.
Completely agree.
So there is more agency, but like, people talking about Free Folk being strong. Of course they are. Yeah,
very much.
I mean, like, I don't think they're not broken. They're not.
No. But they are too strong. I think
they are very, very strong when played very, very well. So I'm not at all surprised. Dominate himself.
Man.
Drop him into the chat.
Really struggle. I mean, it's just a very quick aside on Free Folk. As a Free Folk player, and I'd like to think I'm at least okay, at least in the top 70% of Free Folk players, I'd like to think. Big
claim.
Yeah, no, big claim, right? Better than, not as good as the average player is what I'm saying, a Free Folk player. But the point with Free Folk is you really, at the moment, you have two ways of playing it, which is, I think, the correct way, which is you have lots of units, high spam, And then all the other units, people say Cave Dweller Savages are terrible, and I've run Cave Dweller Savages in tournament in most of my lists this tournament to see how it would go. It's purely a test list, and I was very happy with it. But if people turn around and say Cave Dweller Savages aren't worth taking, yeah, I can understand why they would say that. They're not what they used to be. Then people go, oh yeah, but Follows a Bone are really good. Actually, I disagree. I think they're good against a couple of things, but they're a utility tool. They're not a 6-point unit you just stick in a list. People say Bone Lord's Chosen incredible. They're a 10-point unit, assuming you take Route Shirt attachment. You don't just stick them in a list. These are very big parts of a free folk list that have to work effectively. And Giants are the same problem. Don't get me wrong, new Giants are great. But new Giants, you have to build a list around them very specifically, whereas the other components will naturally work and synergize much more easily. And for me, what I'm saying when it comes to a balance issue, Raiders and Trappers, if you know how to play them, will get you much better results, and myself and Psychopath can prove that time and time again. They will get you much, much better results than these elite units ever will, on average. And
funnily enough, Deoxys says Thens, a unit that just didn't even come up in the conversation. I think that.
But that I think is a balance issue.
The game just the meta in general, just to move on from free vote.
Sure.
I'm bored of them. Bored of them.
That's fair enough.
The game in general so favors high activation count that Raiders at 3 points are just a phenomenal buy.
Yeah.
Trappers have great utility at 4. They can be overspammed, but that free folk are like the solution to the problem created by the way activation advantage currently kind of plays out in the game. It's really interesting, though. Actually, you've just dropped in over onto the results of the tournament, and you'll see that even though a Stark player won, actually Free Folk held the highest win rate over the tournament as a whole. Yep. And quite interestingly, Baratheons coming in really well placed as well. And that the Starks as a whole had a less than 50% win rate because there are, even though there's a Stark winner, there's a ton of Starks at the bottom of the tournament.
Yep.
They're not an I win. They're not an I win button.
No.
No faction is in this game.
But I think, and we'll go over to another tournament because we're going to get a familiar name crop up. Where is it? Here it is. Heroes of the North Online. Now, this tournament, 20 points, and we all know what points in this stream mean. Absolutely nothing. 20 points. Ariakas ran the tournament, and then Shifty Eyes. Ariakas won the tournament. Anyway, no.
Well,
now he's
first of all, congratulations to Ariakas becoming the very first person to become a double champion, the only person who appears in the Hall of Champions twice. So fair play to him.
Should we have a look at his lists and compare? Oh, yes,
we could do. Yeah.
So these are the hero of the North. He played Starks again.
Rob. He played Howland.
Robin Howland.
He played 10 activations. He played 9 activations. Going back to Boards and Swords. Furyoku played Rob. He played Howland. He played 10 activations. He played 9 activations. He played Direwolves in both lists.
We look at Ariakas from NRG.
Playing
Eddard and Howland.
Very similar list, one that he won the NRG event with. Playing 10 activations, 9 activations. All 3 of these, or 6 if you count both lists, but all 3 of these pairings, they're subtly different. It's not the same list, like cookie cutted and put in every single time. There are variants, but the format that it goes by is identical. It is extremely powerful units paired with very, very high activation count, with some dead activations that you can take just to waste time.
Yes.
Paired up with a very, very powerful Stark deck.
Yep.
And 2 commanders that bring incredibly powerful Stark cards. Rob's cards are phenomenal. He would be an amazing commander, even if he didn't bring Greywind at all.
Yes.
Um, and Howland too. Howland is an NCU commander, which is just known to be significantly stronger than most on-field commanders. Rob is the only other on-field commander who really competes with him because he brings an activation. But yeah, he's an NCU, brings an activation, and brings great powerful cards, particularly against Direwolves himself. That just seems to be the Stark winning combo. But unfortunately, the thing is when you don't play that Stark winning combo, you don't win.
No.
You might even come last. Like, it's not good for Starks that is their only really good continuous way to win.
I do think there are other lists out there, and I do think that there are other options out there for Starks to be competitive. But the big issue, as you say, is that like a Rob Howland or Howland with even like you can even put in the other commanders, but realistically, Rob is your probably best second choice. You run this combo, and it's just good, and it's hard. Like we sat there, and I know George got Great John in the first Builder tournament. And we talked a little about Great John last week. You've mentioned Great John, and I think Great John's a great commander. I look at Great John cards and go, wow, that's great. And then nobody who plays Starks gives a toss. Because why would I pick a really good commander when I can have this instead? And it's the eternal problem of a lot. It's not just this faction.
A class above. They're just everything else is A tier, B tier. There's nothing wrong with it, but they're just S tier, S plus tier, broken tier. Like as commanders alone, those two are off the charts powerful.
Yeah, and
the faction as a whole is fine. The faction is fine. The commanders are powerful.
Yes, and I think you could say about a lot of things. I think, and there are underpowered commanders as well. I mean, I will always bring up Rattleshirt as an example.
Every faction's got them.
You know, Rattleshirt is a great commander to want to play, but I really challenge anybody to make a list for Rattleshirt and then literally just take a direct substitution of commander and think that list is better. And you shouldn't have to feel like that, and it makes me sad. Now, obviously, there's always going to be bottoms of the pile. Yeah. You're on mentioning Jaime Lannister in there as well. Yeah, Jaime Lannister is a commander. You want to run him?
They made Jaime better, and he's still terrible.
Unplayed, completely unplayed.
He's in that scale of terrible where people won't play him, so we can't even get statistics on him. So we can't find out how terrible he is because nobody plays him. What makes Renly's rating so low is that people believe he's good, but he loses. So he has a lot of submissions, and he generally goes down in ranking over time. There are tons of worse commanders than Renly. I don't think Renly's good, but there are worse commanders. There's Vargo Hope. There is Jaime Lannister. There is plenty of bad choices, but they are played so infrequently that they are taking a very long time to come from 0 to get down to the minus 90 or whatever Renly currently sits at. I think he's had a little revival recently. It might even be minus 70 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Whoop, whoop. But you know,
I'll have a look for you, shall I? Why not? We'll get the actual numbers.
Yeah, where we
Scroll
at?
Straight to the bottom. I'm not gonna wait for them all to
load.
All the way
down.
Nice way. Yep. So he's minus 68. He's marginally 68? Worse than Tywin. He's recovered a bit.
He's doing good.
But actually, this was something that George mentioned on our in our Facebook group where we ask what people want to talk about. If there's anything questions wise, one of the things he mentioned is Renly has recovered a little bit. Now, there's two caveats to this. Renly has recovered. Can't deny that. Renly is going up. He's still the worst, but he's recovering slightly. He's closing that gap. Now, first of all, I lost to Renly. I was playing Free Folk. Free Folk versus Baratheons, a massively favoured Free Folk matchup. That will have swung the results slightly. That would have been enough to pull Renly up probably nearly 10 points on its own. But then there's other considerations as well. There are other people playing Renly, other people getting wins. So yes, he's recording more wins and he's beating more factions, but really, this is variance. This is seeing a positional change is more important than seeing a numbers change, because a numbers change is just variance within a given week. You know.
I would say
Small numbers
I would
changes
say
anyway.
he's more than just on a week by week variance at the moment. What
Yeah.
we've actually seen is tell you what's quite interesting, and this is maybe slightly Dakota kind of followed it up with a question: is Renly getting better because he's playing less good commanders? Is he playing against weaker options, and that's why he's finally getting some wins? And yeah, I mean, Greg says in the chat that Renly's what do you say? A scrub buster. Yeah, exactly. If you're bad, Renly is a nightmare to play into. But at the highest level, you can understand what he's about to do, and you can outpredict him, and you can outplay him. He does have to be outplayed though, because just in a straight up front on front 1v1 fight, Renly and Rose Knight, that's terrifying. So what I actually think is happening is we've actually seen, if you look at the faction rankings as a whole, they've compressed. And by compressed, I mean everybody who's plus has lost some points. Everybody who's negative has gained some points. The separation between the top ranked commander and the lowest ranked commander has fallen. The separation between the top ranked faction and the lowest ranked faction has fallen. All of the stats are compressing together. And why is that? That's because more games are becoming kind of like 50-50s and less defined by what faction or commander is being played. And that's because a large number of the submissions to the site right now are through the First Builder League. And the First Builder League forces players to play commanders and factions that they're not familiar with. So when you play a faction that you're not good with, you're far more likely to get a result which goes against the general statistics in general. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing player skill becoming far more apparent, player skill across a whole range of factions as opposed to people just playing with their favorite faction. But we're seeing player skill getting pulled apart while faction rankings get compressed. It's temporary, in my opinion. And as soon as the majority of submissions go back to being everybody playing with their favorite faction, the factions will separate again. The factions will steady themselves. So the answer is, in general, I believe that Renly is playing into a weaker opponent, and that leads to him being stronger. Weaker opponent being that a person's playing with a faction and a commander and an army and a tactics deck and units and a situation and a beta game mode, all of which they're less familiar with. So they're playing less perfectly. They're making more mistakes. And that's what Renly relishes. He relishes mistakes and he exposes mistakes and absolutely destroys you if you make bad ones. And I think that's my personal opinion. My personal opinion is that's really favoring him. And that's what's allowing Renly to bounce back right now.
I think that's also from a perspective of, it's compressing the statistics, but Renly's not, he hasn't made the positional gains. He may have gotten closer to the people who are also at the bottom, but he's not jumping up the rankings. He's not winning these games consistently and getting massive boosts. He's just getting slight increments every now and then. And that's...
Interestingly, Baratheons have taken third spot. Baratheons have taken a positional gain. But that is off the back of the fact that Courtney Penrose is now the #1 ranked commander on the site. Courtney Penrose is an absolute powerhouse once you get used to his cards and his NCU commander and start to build a competitive list with him. Courtney's top dog. Courtney's top dog, partly because Rob's fallen off a little bit recently, but
he's still up there. Rob is still up there, though.
Yeah, it's anybody's game between the two of them, but yeah, Courtney's the man for the Baratheons.
What
if
I will say as well,
running Courtney in one of your competitive tournament lists and designing your other list around Courtney, then I think you're missing the biggest strength of the Baratheons right now.
The one thing I did want to say though, and it's a bit of a shame, it's a sadness, because I know that the Night's Watch are a faction out there that it's actually got a lot of love. A lot of people like the Night's Watch, not because they're a good army or they have interesting tools or anything like that. It's just that the Night's Watch are interesting. It's as simple as that. Now, obviously, the shows in the book, I think a lot of people like them from that as well. But they fall into this 11th place commander of the big factions, of the main factions. They're the one that just they just don't perform overall, and yet everyone will look at their arm. Ranger hunters, ranger trackers. They're great tools, but they just can't really sum it up into a consistent list format and styles. And I don't know. I think there's something.
I
There's
think we
something
see
missing.
we see a lot of variance in the lists that people field with Night's Watch. I think that
Yeah.
they're struggling. They're struggling between a balance between the fact that you either try and compete on this high activation count, or you field what you feel are your core stable Night's Watch lists. Carl says, War Machines. Yeah, War Machines are super powerful. That's playing into the Othel style, but we always see them coming with Scorpion modifications. That's setting you back like 8 points. If you want to run them with crossbows, you spent so many points so quickly, and then there is a hesitancy towards playing conscripts, even though I think they're very, very powerful since that they got the ability to take vows now.
Vow change, yeah.
So I think that conscripts really do have a place, and they allow the free folk to emulate this style that a lot of other factions are using in terms of powerful activations countered by these passing of activations. Whereas when you play a more what's the word, like more standard Night's Watch list, your go-to Night's Watch list, it has parity across all its units. They're all useful, but if any one of them isn't putting in enough work, the other ones will get exposed and surrounded and taken apart.
Yeah.
It's odd. It's very odd, because actually, when I look at my own personal page, the faction that I have least success playing into is Night's Watch. That I have my worst record against the Night's Watch. So I can't tell you that they're weak. I don't think that they're weak.
Well, I think this actually comes back
they're
to
not quite cutting it.
So the big problem, I think, Night's Watch are, people say the gunline style. You can play gunline style things with Night's Watch with the War Machines. And you think Lannisters, which is predominantly the faction that you play, Carlo, and your second faction being Baratheon. Both of those factions are not fans of crossbowmen. They don't want to see crossbowmen on the other side of the field. You don't even like seeing Lannister crossbowmen when you're a Lannister player. So I think that's probably why yourself having a bad win rate against those is because I think Night's Watch counter those factions a little bit.
That's true.
I do think they're a natural counter.
They have quite a natural counter into defensive armies because they can force you out. I think
they just die to Starks.
The aggressive armies take them apart a bit because they just make moves that the Night's Watch don't necessarily counter well enough.
I've seen it happen. I've seen Tully Cavaliers just straight up just charge a unit of Builder Crossbowmen, and the Builder Crossbowmen go, "Yeah, I can get to stand and shoot," and the Tully Cavaliers goes, "Okay, I'm probably just gonna kill you because you probably can't do enough damage to me," and like.
And that's if they haven't had the maneuverability to already get them in the flank.
But, exactly.
But point is that they can. It's not even a risk for them to just go head first straight into the front.
Yep.
And have realistic chances of blowing right through them, and then just surrounding
your unit down. You're in behind.
But,
yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
But yeah, I think it's interesting.
What's wrong with them? I don't know what's wrong with them. Some people say maybe people just aren't playing them well, and that definitely could be the answer. What we've not seen is, other than there was a small tournament in Gamers Haven, which has recorded a Night's Watch winner, a 10-man event.
Yep.
All submissions matter. All tournaments are true. They can win. We've not seen them even on a top table on any big event yet. They're up there. They can win games, but they fall at some hurdle. It's not even the last hurdle. They don't make it to the last hurdle. They fall on some kind of mid hurdle.
Yeah. And it's a shame, really. I mean, other factions up there and other tournament results. Lannisters have had a bit of a drop, obviously, because they had the meteoric rise somewhat because of, I think, Assault on River Run, and we talked about that last
Mm-hmm.
week.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
The mountain that rides.
the Mountain That Rides, yeah, and he's back. He's back again, isn't he? The Mountain That Rides for Gold on Dice, is that right?
Is he? Maybe.
I think he
Maybe.
is.
Maybe.
Um, everything present on Army Builder till the 26th of July is permitted. So yeah,
There you go. If it's on,
which
if
he
it's
is.
on, it's in. If it's on, it's in. That's
Um,
probably yeah. That's gonna be first builders. That's gonna be
oh
all
yeah,
sorts
First
of stuff.
Builders. Although we don't know all of First Builder's rules, do we? The
Only
Senior
so we know
Builder,
his attachment version. We
yeah,
don't know
modification does.
what his modification can do.
So Senior Builder is going to make an appearance, no doubt. Senor Builder. I don't know why I did that, but he yeah. So I mean, I think that's going to be a big thing, and I think we'll see Lannisters again see play. I think Lannisters again will get wins, so that's not a surprise to me. But that tournament's obviously going to be quite big. I think that's the biggest event we've got going on internationally, isn't it? The biggest one we've got currently going on. Laughter is Fear to Poison. We
Yeah, I
talked
mean,
about
it's
last
really we've
week.
spoken about it a little bit, but it's a really interesting idea. So basically, Gold on Dice are physically placed in Malta. They want to run a really big, successful tournament. They were looking to run a really big physical tournament before COVID came along. They were even, looking to kind of get people to fly in for it, and were even thinking about, paying for people to fly in to play. Because they're trying to build a big community, but obviously being in Malta, they're a little bit isolated. They don't have enough people to play against and that kind of stuff, but they have big ideas. So it's kind of come to a really good compromise, which is that they are running a technically physical event with kind of the 18, 20 people that they have in Malta playing nationally. They will play any games they can physically, but they've also doubled up the size of the tournament and allowed players to play through TTS. And
Very good.
it's effectively kind of like them multinationals, but run with kind of guest appearance from around the rest of the world. And I've spoken to the guys about the tournament. They seem really keen to do really big things. So hopefully the tournament will go well. There was that little bit of discussion about it had an entry fee and it had good prize support. And when there was the tiniest bit of backlash about the entry fee, they just said, yeah, there's no entry fee then. If you're not happy with it, no entry fee. We're putting the tournament up. Here's the prize pool. We're not doing it to make money. We're doing it to make a really big, good event. So I think
Kudos to them.
I think it's going to go really well.
I've spoken to the
I
guys
could
a
sit
little
here and
bit.
tell you to go sign up, but it's already full.
Yeah. I've spoken to the
All I'd
guys a
say
little
is,
bit. Spot on.
through a small fault of mine, it's actually oversubscribed. So when they tell you to submit your lists, I would not dawdle around and start saying, "Oh no, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow." I'd upload your lists, otherwise, you'll be in risk of being well. We've got 42 people for a 40-player tournament here, so you might not make the cut.
The yeah, I mean that was me and Carlo testing last night and this morning, wasn't it? You were getting me to try and sign up, and about 20 minutes before the stream, I signed up again, didn't I? And you were like, "Oh, hang on,
brilliant.
wait."
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I haven't fixed the problem. Anyway, some of the little things. Random Army tournament from Maritimes. Now, this I had to check. I had no idea what Maritimes was, and it turns out it's East Coast Canada, the maritime area of East Coast Canada, they call it, which is, I have no idea what Canadian states are, so I apologise ahead. But it's like the eastern bit that's under where Greenland is, and kind of like those eastern sides. And apparently they've got a really good community and like a really insular community, and they all know each other really well. But he's running a tournament there. It is a TTS event, as far as I'm aware. It's open to anybody across the world. But yeah, it's run by this guy George, who's trying to start a little bit of a community up there, which is great. The Oceanic Cutthroats, which I believe is a strangely enough Oceanic tournament. It's another tournament with prize support from Toy Soldier Imports, who did Assault on River Run through Makista. This time it's Midnight who's TOing it, but very similar kind of idea. going to butcher this. Le Tron de la Jedic, which is based in Vesicon. This is a physical tournament in France. And another one in Brussels as well, Belgium. Valar Bruselius Fall Winter League, which is going to be great.
There are tons of tournaments popping up on the site. So many so that I can barely even keep up with them myself. So it's good to have a check in and see what they are at any given time. Just for Carl, who asked, yes, Gold on Dice is full. It has been full for a little while. If you mean like interestingly, it's 5 rounds and it's set at 40 players. That means that there will be a single undefeated player, but they could go anywhere up to, technically they can go up to 64 and still maintain. They are running an incomplete 64 bracket at the moment. If you message them, you might be able to convince them to let you in. I don't know.
I will be super honest. They probably would.
He might open it up to more people if lots of people come to him and say, we'd really like to enter as well. He might do. I'm making no promises for a tournament that I'm not TOing in any way. But
they're spot on. Honestly, they're spot on, guys. They're doing it. I think the most important thing is what they're doing is it's a community-based event. They're not doing it for any reason other than creating and helping the community. And anyone with that mindset and with that intention and doing the right things to reach that cannot fault. Cannot fault. Full support for people like that.
And I'll help you in any way you need. If you're trying to run an event, I'll help you with the site, help you with the tournament, help you advertise it, get it out there. Just send me a message.
Yeah.
There's a tiny bit of discussion about the organized play in kind of Simon's announcement. Yeah, funnily enough, I kind of had been working on the stats site for about 3 months before the announcement for organized play. So I am aware that it may still come along. From what I believe it's sort of on hold because of COVID is the only things that I think, I have no contact with Simon. I'm not saying anything. So I'm just trying to I started building this whole thing because I thought that something like this was very much needed, and then it just so happened that Simon sort of think that this is needed too. So until the day that they actually release the app, then use stats, and then when they release the app, maybe still use stats, but.
But that's up to them, isn't it?
I think that this is very much what organized play might have intended to be one day, might intend to be like one day.
Yeah.
I hope the community think that this is filling that hole, because that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. On the flip side, one more tournament I wanted to shout out, because I decided to pull the plug because I was obviously entering First Builder League. I've been in Boards and Swords. I wanted a bit of a break, but then I thought, sod it, I need something to do. So I've gone on to Skirmish at Twins. And
now that you've weaseled out of me what faction I have and what commanders I'm using.
No, actually, no. I literally just entered because I thought, you know what, I've got some spare time. I've got. There might
even be some spaces left in Skirmish at the Twins.
There is, there's a couple left. I think maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think there's a few spaces, and it's got about. I think it needs to be. You need to have chosen your commanders by this weekend.
Yep.
It's random faction, choose your own commanders. Seems to be a format that people have taken up from the first builder kind of concept. People maybe don't like the complete randomness that I went for. They like to maintain a little bit more control, but people seem to be quite into this idea of controlling the faction entries, shall we say. And that's really good that we've seen lots of those events like that. And yes, more importantly, it's a 30-point tournament, and I'm really interested to see what it will play out and what effect that will have, with some interesting mix of current and beta game modes.
I'm stoked. I'm super stoked.
I feel like I haven't managed to find enough time to really get my head around whether or not my lists are right yet, but I've gone for some commanders, which couldn't possibly fail because one of them's Courtney Penrose, right?
Yeah, I was going to say you were playing Baratheon, aren't you? Yeah. would you like to take a guess at what I've randomed? You'll never guess.
Wild punt on free folk.
Actually, no. Think
Oh,
completely
okay.
other end. Think completely other end.
You grabbed some targs.
Yeah, I got
Good
Targs.
stuff. Good
Which
stuff. I
actually,
would love to see a Grey Worm. Grey Worm and Unsullied. Who's going to have enough points at 30 points to stop that unit?
I
Grey
know, right?
Worm in Unsullied.
I'm
Belwas?
stoked. I'm stoked because
Sell
two
me?
NCUs
Sell
might
me?
work. I'm stoked because two NCU meta. This might be the space where two NCU meta is more viable,
True. True.
and I'm super stoked because I think I see a lot of hate for Targs, and I know Targs are statistically bad. But I am very much with the likes of the Khal Drogos, the Blood Ravens out there who believe that Targs have a place. Just not even Deoxys. Deoxys will happily play Targs, you know. Um, they're just they're not all there yet, but I believe that there is a way that they can work. And I think
I
30
think,
points might be interesting.
yeah, I think
Greg,
that 40-point meta is not helping the Targaryens right now, and that they could do well at the 30. I think my guess is that not as many people will run Varys and Walder.
9
Walder, because
points.
of his
Ooh.
cost, every point is really, you've got to pinch for every point at 30. And Varys, because you can't expect to play into a heavy NCU meta on the opposite side. So maybe that's not true. Maybe
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 Varys
we
gets
will
more use
still
then.
see Varys all over the place at 4 points.
Yeah.
He's still a good buy, without giving away too many list building things and really letting everybody know. I'm running 2 3-point NCUs in both my lists. I think that still maintaining. So I want to get as many units onto the board because you still got Game of Thrones. You still got to try and cover as many objectives as possible at a time. And yet, so I'm just going to pack in the cheapest NCUs I can.
So Eldon,
Hello,
Shira,
Shira. Hello, Axel.
Shira,
Hello,
Axel.
Eldon.
You, without giving away too many options of what list I've built, here are my
Yeah.
NCU roster.
Here's my
you know.
NCU roster, which couldn't be anything other than these people because that's my only choices.
Yes.
But
Well done, Carlo.
I mean, that's but I value the 3 NCU. We'll see whether or not it's right at all. 8 Raiders with 3 skin changes. Oh, that's rough. Yeah, I mean, so there are some things about 30 points which maybe are less well defined, which is there are some things limited at 40, such as board space, assuming we still play on 4x4 foot, which I
Which
think we
we
do.
should be,
It
yeah.
doesn't say play on anything other than 4x4 up until the point where you're above 40 points. Basically, how are you gonna? You're not limited by space anymore.
I'm just
You've
gonna
got 10 points less, but you can still fill the board with free folks. So
throw this out
interesting.
there. Targs, high maneuverability, less units on the board, more space between
Yeah,
units.
I think
I'm happy with. Honestly, I was really happy. I said when Makista drawed it, I said, I want Targs. I want Targs. I really like to get Targs. And he drew it, and he said, yeah, you're in luck. You got Targs. So I mean,
plus he allowed a redraw of other things, so loads of other people probably passed them off to you.
probably, which I'm glad
But if you
about.
sign up now, it's probably your only options are dogs or neutrals.
But yes. Anyway, so that's Skirmish at the Twins, the 30-point tournament.
Yeah, super excited,
Yeah,
just because
so good.
I love. So interesting to think about other just like ways that we can re-look at the meta, re-look at what can become stale. If you watch a ton of games, if you look at the results from a ton of games, you can start to see patterns, and so you just start to look for ways that you can mix it up and allow for new things to be successful. And I think the move to 30 points is a massive one of them. Like, I am not super on board with the move to 50. I'm not into huge games. You might as well, you're talking about go back and play 40k, go back and play fantasy. In my opinion, that's a really long game. You're moving away from the value of the tactics board. You're moving away from the value of the tactics cards,
I think
and you're just becoming a slugfest.
the problem is as well at 50 points, I might add, although I can see the value in it, scoring hasn't decreased in speed. So at 50 points, you actually score points at the same rate, meaning that points on the board that you scored fast anyway, you're still going to be scoring quickly. Meaning that yes, you might pay 50 points and more things might happen, but all you're doing is speeding up any killing that happens. And those units that don't get into combat are effectively even more wasted. So yeah, you're right. It puts an onus on getting into combat and having these big brawls. But things like, sticking direwolves at the back and scoring more points in Game of Thrones is still going to win you the game because they score at the same rate as they did at 40 points.
But is it going to win you at 30? Maybe.
Might not. It might win at 30, but it might not.
Until my Axel Florent NCU absolutely nukes you off the board, so don't direwolf spam or I'm coming for you.
What NCUs did you run? Shire, Axel, why? Wolves!
Exactly.
But yeah, so
wolves, skin changes. See you later. See you later.
So that's kind of tournaments out of the way, and we talked about Hall of Champions, we talked about the lists, we sort of long talk about lists and balancing and things like that. Now, really, we've got about 10 minutes left where we can talk to you guys about any questions or anything that you guys want to bring up. So drop anything in chat that you think we haven't covered, anything you want to talk about. But Carlo, I've got a question for you.
Oh.
Yeah?
You're going to drop a big question on me, which I probably don't want to answer.
Big question. Yeah? What do you think about Dario Naharis? And more importantly, the GOAT in relation to their affiliation cards. And I know you spoke about this on the ranking system, but I think you've had some more thoughts. And by the way, Carlo's wearing a Pikachu top. It's his it's his famous Pikachu top.
My Pikachu jumper.
Yeah.
Maybe send me full screen, Mickey.
You want some full screen?
What do I feel like you've kind of like
just made you repeat yourself a little bit.
Yeah, you feel like you dropped me right in it. Like I'm supposed to have some really deep thoughts on.
No, hot takes, quick, hot takes.
Hot takes. I think that I think Dario Naharis is a poor man's Grey Worm now that Grey Worm's out.
Yep.
I think that I want Vargo Hope to work. I think that there might be a bit of a meme Baratheon weakness spam kind of list that exists, maybe with a ton of wardens. But Vargo's problem is that the Mummer units are all overcosted.
Right.
Skirmishers.
On that point,
not worth 6 points. Zorse Riders not worth 7 points. So your affiliations are worthless because your units are not worth having.
I will refer to a Discord conversation was had about bloody Mummer skirmishers. I looked at them again, and I was trying to make some lists with bloody Mummers because I'm gonna make it work. And I looked at something I built, and it physically made me sadder. Like something I enjoy doing, and it made me sad. I was like, what on earth are these options?
Skirmishes are just a real issue for me at the moment. I know that there are like these synergies there, like, oh, you could weaken them and then they could attack you and then you could parry and then you could they could roll loads of ones and they could practically kill themselves with an attack. But it's like, question, why is Horses so bad? So skirmishers, I still don't think I'd pick them if they cost 5 points.
I think the thing is, if they're at 5,
they cost 6 points.
If they're at 5, they compete directly with Cutthroats, and I can see scenarios where you might pick the Mummers over the Cutthroats. I can see scenarios.
They become the defensive mirror to the offensive Cutthroat.
Yes.
But at the moment, they're
6.
just a terrible version of. You're not supposed to cross faction compare, but we're actually internal faction comparing here.
Yep.
And we're comparing them as neutrals in every other faction. We're 7 faction comparing. There's almost never a case where there isn't a better 6-point unit for you to take.
Although
there's almost never a case where the Cutthroat wouldn't be the better choice. Greg says maybe it's that Cutthroats are too good for 5.
Yes.
But
I do think actually personally they probably are.
But like
But
you make them 5, make skirmishers 5. They're still worse than sworn swords. They're still worse than cutthroats. They're still worse than poor fellows in my mind. They're still worse than
I think
anything.
for me,
Everything.
I think the big one is that there's 3 units that need to be looked at. Mama skirmishers really just need to be looked at. They are clearly not right. Cutthroats need to be looked at because they are actually one of the most aggressive, best 5-point options in the game. When Starks are considering taking them over Sworn Swords, that says a lot. And Sworn Swords need to be looked at because as a baseline unit, like I think two of the best baseline units in the game are Wardens and Lannister Guards, because they don't offer anything really except what they say on the tin. They just say, look, this is a defensive unit that offers you a bit of backlash when it's defensive. But most people don't take guards without putting something in it. You put something in guards.
Yeah, so they're not 5.
No, but they are a 5-point unit, because a 5-point unit should be something you take because you feel like you just want something really basic. The moment you start adding things into it, it's no longer a 5-point unit. Well, people don't take Wardens base most of the time. They stick an attachment in. But as a baseline to work from, 5-point Wardens are completely fine. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not overcosted, not undercosted.
I don't know. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of either. I have to say, I'm not a fan of either.
But the problem is the other 5-point units.
Both of them are slow and easily ignored.
But is that a problem of those units in particular, or is it a problem that the 5-point units in other factions are clearly just a much higher baseline level? And when I say much higher, even effectively half a point higher makes a big difference in those units. Sworn Swords for 5 points are very cost efficient, very good. Cutthroat's the same. Is that a function of the other units being bad, or is actually the baseline for 5 points being skewed by the good units? I think that's one of my big concerns.
Just a slight tendency to undercost aggression,
yes.
or that they're equally costed, but that the game is favoring aggression right now, or the way the game plays.
It will always favor maneuverability.
Out huge numbers of dice, then it favors you.
Yes,
I mean, George 3 Sales says give me 5-inch movement on the Wardens, but that's a high price. That's not, you're not going to have them at 5 points no more. You don't get an infantry with a 3+ save and movement 5 and good morale, all for 5 points.
But
you've got to be movement 4. If you want to be heavily armored, you've got to be movement 4.
But for me, that's a big issue.
Who aren't are veterans, right?
Yeah.
Only people who bring 3+ save and a 5+ movement.
And they're very expensive comparatively.
And they don't even carry shields.
No, on the models.
They got a little parry and dagger, right?
Yeah.
But they're
vets.
Parry.
They're vets, man. They've been on the wall for years. So I mean, so Stormcrow Mercenaries are a good. Again, I think Stormcrow Mercenaries, generally speaking, are a good 5-point base unit. Now I know it has its problems with synergies with other things, but as a standard 5-point unit, I don't feel bad when Stormcrow Mercenaries hit the floor and say, "Look, that's worth 5 points," and you go, "Yeah, it is." It allows
a lot on what attachment you can, what attachment you can bring.
Now, obviously,
you bring with your attachment.
Now, obviously, there's the Stark issue with the attachment, but that's the problem with the attachment, not the Stormcrows. Because Stormcrows don't see play in the other factions.
Some Lannister players like to bring them with a guard captain or even with an assault veteran, which I think is a little bit weird. But
I like that. I like
they're supposed to synergize well with the Stormcrow lieutenant. Obviously, he just has good value everywhere.
Yeah.
Obviously, it synergizes and motivated by coin, but their attack profile is not significantly good enough that you would be willing to swap that money bags for that zone in general. So I find that motivated by coin doesn't get a whole lot of use.
I think the problem.
Yeah, Stormcrows are about pure activation efficiency, and
I think they're good.
They can probably bring slightly more than some other factions once you apply a attachment which has a certain goal in mind for you to slightly specialize them. Yet still you're 5 points, so that means that you can provide a different option to your general 5-point unit. If your general 5-point unit is Wardens, they're slow, they can't do anything, but you want something that gives you a bit more mobility, then sure, take them with a Master Warden. Take them with a Stormcrow Lieutenant if you want to be a bit more aggressive. Take it with whatever you want. But that's not because it's an amazing choice in itself, but because it gives you a slightly different dynamic.
But again, I think for a 5-point unit, it's in the right spot. These are all units I would consider balanced, and the problem is they get compared with units that aren't. You say, yeah, but why? Why would I take Stormcrows when I can take Cutthroats? Well, the problem is not Stormcrows. The problem is Cutthroats. Like, the problem is Darksworn Swords. The problem isn't Lannister Guardsmen. And that's kind of the issue I'm getting at, is that people compare them with things that are clearly a problem. Or at least not clearly a problem, but...
Above power curve.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like, the whole game,
curve. Powerful list building is about selecting the things that are all just on just the right end of the power curve. They're worth 5.5 points, but they're costed at 5, as opposed to picking the things that are worth 5.8 points and they cost 6. That's just picking at the low end of the power curve. I don't think that there's anything that you can look at and just be like, well, no, that's not true. Skirmishers and Zorse Riders,
Yes.
I look at and I say, you are wrongly costed. Everything else, it's just you're at the top or the bottom end of what your power level should be for the cost that you are. The others, I think, even if they were a whole point less, I don't think that they're that powerful. So I say you are wrongly costed.
Yeah.
You are 1 point more than you should be, because you take a point away from them, and I don't think you're broken. But everything else, it's just about selecting things that are just a little bit more efficient than they should be. That's what competitive list building is about.
It's the vagaries. It's the vagaries of small points. In the I've used Games Workshop as an example here, but they use the power rankings in the Games Workshop stuff, and it's very kind of like, this is worth 7. But in points system, the points actually how much in a 2,000 point list, that is suddenly worth 200, and this year, without any changes, it's worth 150, and this year it's worth 180. No changes have happened, but there's an internal balance there. But when you work on a very small points value, you overgeneralize the points. So as you say, if you were to make everything worth 10 times more points, Starksworn Swords might be more like 58 points rather than 50.
Yeah,
and,
but then you
don't do that.
Then we just start like pinching points here and
Exactly,
there, and it all becomes a bit weird. There's advantages and disadvantages, but
I agree that that's not a good thing to do.
It makes it harder to balance when you're going to go to such big point differentials. You can open up a lot of space by doubling the points, but like, it's a very big step. It has to be a very conscious decision. I know a lot of people just say, "Oh, just double the points and then you'll have more space," but you're always just going to solve the worst problems, which is just going to rise up some other problems. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Maybe the margins are smaller. Your cutthroats, they go from being 5 points to going to being 11 points, because they were probably worth 5.5. But like, you're now just going to ask, well, are they actually worth 11 points, or are they worth 10.5, or are they worth 11.5? You're still going to pick things on the power curve that are just that half point overcosted, half point undercosted.
Yeah.
It's how list building works. It's how we play when we play competitively.
But I think it
can never be avoided. It can never be avoided. And in general, the game does very, very well, except for the commanders. The commanders are harder to balance because of their intrinsic impact on the rest of the game. They're such a key piece, and with them all being free, there's no balance there.
Could you?
Except for the commanders, there's almost nothing you can't put on the table and say, this is viable for its points. Almost nothing. Almost nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas in other games, there are certainly things that as soon as you pick it, people would literally be like, are you just playing for, do you just pick it because you like the model? Like, it's got no value in terms of competitive gameplay at all. And I think that Song of Ice and Fire has very high parity across the usefulness of units versus what their cost is.
I think skirmishers are the only unit that get close to that.
Everybody's looking for that tiny advantage, and it does exist.
Yeah.
You'll never get rid of it entirely.
No.
The commanders are what are a little bit far apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. great to see you, George.
Yes.
Probably about time to finish anyway, isn't it?
It is. We're just about to wrap up. So yeah, that was our take on the tournaments for this week. We will be back obviously next week, and we'll talk about more about some tournaments. We'll talk about the first Builder League, which is going to end this week, isn't it, Carlo? So the last round is coming up. So we'll talk about that, and we'll see which kind of factions ended in the top half. A quick check on that because it's a bit of a shout out.
I already had a quick look at the numbers, and they're not that pretty.
No. What do you mean pretty? As in?
So I tell you, all right. There's 20 players who currently have 2 wins. 25% of those players are Starks, even though Starks only make up 13% of the entries.
Wow.
20% of them are Free Folk, even though Free Folk only make up 13% of the entries. This is the worst one. No neutrals have managed to make it into the top 20. The top 20, even though 16% of all the entries are neutrals. That's the rough one. No neutral has managed to win 2 games.
Oh.
Out of a lot of entries. So I feel I felt bad at the time every time I gave somebody the old Vargo Hope Dario combo. Every time somebody asked for their pairing, and I said, you got Vargo and Dario. I thought, that's unlucky, mate. But yeah, it's come pretty true. The neutrals are not doing that well. There is even a Targaryen up there. Everybody else is represented other than the neutrals. So that's quite interesting.
It's 2 Targaryens.
We'll see where it ends up. We're getting to crunch time now. All the good players are playing each other. Some players will be significantly more skilled than others and be able to win no matter what factional matchup they get. And we'll see whether or not it holds true right until the end. Right now, Targaryen's sitting at number 1. But there's a lot of people on maximum points, maximum secondary points, and it's all down to who got the most unit kills. Targaryens are pretty good at that.
But we see a Baratheon and Free Folk literally 1 unit point behind, and a Lannister 2, Stark 3. Yeah, he's
really,
all
really not far.
No.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, it's all go in the first Builder League. So we'll obviously give you a roundup of that next Monday, and I think that'll be probably our main feature next week. And yeah, aside from that, guys, we've got the usual. We'll have stats chat coming out later this week. Carlo might decide to record some Commander spotlights, so get over to the group because we might be putting up a poll later this week to see what commanders.
I hate Brendan. Please don't make me talk about Brendan.
I think we should make him talk about Brendan.
Have to talk about Brendan.
We should talk about Brendan. So yeah, we'll go over to the Facebook group, go all that. Anything else? Yeah, just keep telling people of all the things, keep using the site, keep submitting the games, keep entering tournaments, talk about tournaments, get your friends to use the site. Every
tiny little 8-man tournament is loads of stuff. If you can host just a little event, a league, if you can turn your weekly game nights into just a league, which will just pair you up against different people each week, then that'd be brilliant. It just helps people to always submit. I think there's a slight barrier at the moment in terms of people play a game and then they're like, oh, should we submit? Whereas when it's a tournament, people are just like, all right, so now we submit the result because it's already been created as a game. Just submit everything, guys. It really does help. So if you can submit.
Definitely. So yeah, we'll take it from there. So thanks a lot for coming down again. Hopefully we'll catch you all again next week, and I hope to see some more people here. Just keep growing it, slowly getting the community out here. And if anyone's got any questions or anything, obviously feel free to let me know, let Carlo know. Join the Facebook group if you want to get the full interaction. And yeah, enjoy your week, guys, and we'll catch you next Monday.